Hi, 5th grade. Mrs. Pecora back again to read some more of The Witches by Roald Dahl. If you hear some snoring, once again, my puppy is laying next to me, and even though he likes listening to the books, he does snore and fall asleep during it. So if you hear that noise, don't be alarmed. It's just him. And it's not me, I promise. I didn't fall asleep reading the book. So we left off, Grandmama was trying to show the Jenkinsons their son, and they didn't believe her, and they screamed and carried on, and it was just a disaster. So let's read and see what happens next in The Witches. The Plan. Trying to center this, boys and girls, so you can see it. Okay. When we got back to the bedroom, my grandmother took me and Bruno out of her handbag and put us on the table. "Why on earth didn't you speak up and tell your father who you were?" she said to Bruno. "Because I had my mouth full," Bruno said. He jumped straight back into the bowl of bananas and went on with his eating. "What a very disagreeable little boy you are," my grandmother said to him. "Not boy," I said, "mouse." "Quite right, my darling. But we don't have time to worry about him at this moment. We have plans to make. In about an hour and a half's time, all the witches will be going down to supper in the dining room, right?" "Right," I said. "And every one of them has got to be given a dose of the mouse maker. How on earth are we going to do that?" "Grandmama," I said, "I think you are forgetting that a mouse can go places where human beings can't." "That's quite right," she said, "but even a mouse can't go creeping around on the tabletop carrying a bottle and sprinkling mouse maker all over the witch's roast beef without being spotted." "I wasn't thinking about doing it in the dining room," I said. "Then where?" she asked. "In the kitchen," I said, "while their food is being got ready." My grandmother stared at me. "My darling child," she said slowly, "I do believe that turning you into a mouse has doubled your brain power." "A little mouse," I said, "can go scuttling around the kitchen among the pots and pans, and if he's very careful, no one will see him." "Brilliant!" my grandmother cried out. "By golly, I think you've got it." "The only thing is," I said, "how will I know which food is theirs? I don't want to put it in the wrong saucepan. It would be disastrous if I turned all the other guests into mice by mistake, and especially you, Grandmama." "Then I guess you'll have to creep in the kitchen, find a good hiding place, and wait and listen. Just lie there in some dark cranny, listening and listening to what the cooks are saying. And then, with a bit of luck, somebody's going to give you a clue. Whenever they have a big party to cook for, the food is always prepared separately." "Right," I said. "That's what I'll have to do. I shall wait there, and then I shall listen, and I shall hope for a bit of luck." "It's going to be very dangerous," my grandmother said. "Nobody welcomes a mouse in the kitchen. If they see you, they'll squash you to death." "I won't let them see me," I said. "Don't forget, you'll be carrying the bottle," she said, "so you won't be nearly as quick and nippy." "I can run quite fast standing up with the bottle in my arms," I said. "I did it just now, don't you remember? I came all the way from the Grand High Witch's room carrying it." "What about unscrewing the top?" she said. "That might be difficult for you." "Let me try," I said. I took hold of the little bottle, and using my front paws, I found I was able to unscrew the cap quite easily. "That's great," my grandmother said. "You really are a clever mouse." She glanced at her watch. "At 7:30, she said, "I shall go down to the dining room for supper with you in my handbag. And then I shall release you under the table together with the precious bottle. And from then on, you'll be on your own. You will have to work your way unseen across the dining room to the door that leads into the kitchen. There will be waiters going in and out of that door all the time. You have to choose the right moment and nip in behind one of them. But for heaven's sakes, be sure that you don't get trodden on or squeezed in the door." "I'll try not to," I said. "And whatever happens, you mustn't let them catch you." "Don't go on about it, Grandmama. You're making me nervous." "You're a brave little fellow," she said, "and I do love you." "What shall we do with Bruno?" I asked her. Bruno looked up. "I'm coming with you," he said, speaking with his mouth full of banana. "I'm not going to miss my supper." My grandmother considered this for a moment. "I'll take you along," she said, "if you promise to stay in my bag and keep absolutely silent." "Will you pass food down to me from the table?" Bruno asked. "Yes," she said, "if you promise to behave yourself." Would you like something to eat, my darling? She said to me. No, thank you, I said. I'm too excited to eat, and now I've got to keep fit and frisky for the big job ahead. It's a big job, all right, my grandmother said. You'll never do a bigger one. In the kitchen. Trying to see if it lined up there, boys and girls. I think it did. The time has come, my grandmother said. The great moment has arrived. Are you ready, my darling? It was exactly 7:30. Bruno was in the bowl finishing that 4th banana. Hang on, he said. Just a few more bites. No, my grandmother said. We've got to go. She picked him up and held him tight in her hand. She was very tense and nervous. I had never seen her like that before. I'm going to put you both in my handbag now, she said, but I shall leave the clasp undone. She popped Bruno into it first. I waited, clutching the little bottle to my chest. Now you, she said. She picked me up and gave me a kiss on the nose. Good luck, my darling. Oh, and by the way, you realize you got a tail, don't you? A what? I said. A tail. A long, curly tail. I must say that never occurred to me, I said. Good gracious me, so I have. I can see it now. I can actually move it. It is rather grand, isn't it? I mention it only because it might come in useful when you're climbing about in the kitchen, my grandmother said. You can curl it around and you can hook it onto things and you can swing from it and lower yourself to the ground from high places. I wish I'd known this before, I said. I could have practiced using it. Too late now, my grandmother said. We've got to go. She popped me into her handbag with Bruno, and at once I took up my usual perch in the small side pocket so I could poke my head out and see what was going on. My grandmother picked up her walking stick, and out she went into the corridor to the lift, which is elevator, boys and girls. She pressed the buttons, and the lift came up, and she got on. There was no one in there with us. Listen, she said, I won't be able to talk to you much once we're in the dining room. If I do, people will think I'm dotty and talking to myself. The lift reached the ground floor and stopped with a jerk. My grandmother walked out of it and crossed the lobby of the hotel and entered the dining room. It was a huge room with gold decorations on the ceiling and big mirrors around the walls. Oh, bless me, boys and girls. The regular guests always had their tables reserved for them, and most of them were already in their places and starting to eat their suppers. Waiters were buzzing all over the place, carrying plates and dishes. Our table was the small one beside the right-hand wall about halfway down the room. My grandmother made her way to it and sat down. Peeping out of the handbag, I could see in the very center of the room 2 long tables that were not yet occupied. Each of them carried a notice fixed on onto sort of a silver stick, and the notice said, reserved for members of the RSPCC. My grandmother looked towards the long tables but said nothing. She unfolded her napkin and spread it over the handbag on her lap. Her hand gently slid under the napkin and took hold of me gently. With the napkin covering me, she lifted me up close to her face and whispered, I'm about to put you on the floor under the table. The tablecloth reaches almost to the ground so no one will see you. Have you got the bottle? Yes, I whispered back. I'm ready, Grandmama. Just then, a waiter in a black suit came up to our table. I could see his legs from under the napkin, and as soon as I heard his voice, I knew who he was. His name was William. Good evening, madam, he said to my grandmother. Where is the little gentleman tonight? He's not feeling well, my grandmother said. He's staying in his room. I'm sorry to hear that, William said. Today there is green pea soup to start with, and for the main course you have a choice of either grilled fillet of sole or roast lamb. Pea soup and roast lamb for me, please, my grandmother said. But don't hurry it, William. I am in no rush tonight. In fact, you can bring me a glass of dry sherry first. Of course, madame, William said, and he went away. My grandmother pretended she had dropped something, and as she bent down, she slid me out from under the napkin onto the floor, under the table. Go, darling, go, she whispered, and then she straightened up again. I was on my own now. I stood clasping the little bottle. I knew exactly where the door into the kitchen was. I had to go about halfway around the enormous dining room to reach it. Here goes, I thought, and like a flash, I skittled out from under the table and made for the wall. I had no intention of going across the dining room floor. It was far too risky. My plan was to cling close to the skirting of the wall all the way around until I reached the kitchen door. All right, boys and girls, we're going to stop there. So let's see what happens if he makes it to the kitchen tomorrow. Bye-bye.